Welcome back to High School Backups Podcast. Today is me and Andrew going through another mid-season mock draft for you. We did one a couple weeks ago. If you haven't seen it, you should go check that out. But this time we're going to do it a little bit different, switch it up, and the picks we're going to make sense. At the very least, like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell us how we did. Andrew, you ready to go?
Ready. Let's do this.
All right. So, first overall, we do have the Texans. This is their actual pick. They have a second pick at round 9. I'm not sure who's pick. Oh,
It's the Browns.
it's the Browns pick, right? Okay. I think that'll change and get later into the first round when that comes. But as of right now, this is the draft order on the left side of the screen. And the Texans need a quarterback. This is pretty basic. You go C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. I did Bryce Young in our last mock draft a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to go with C.J. Stroud first overall to the Houston Texans. Again, I haven't done my quarterback evaluations yet, which I will be doing in the spring when draft time comes. I think these are the two best quarterbacks in the draft, followed by Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. I don't think you can go wrong with either, but I'm going to go C.J. Stroud here.
I can agree to that. Not much really to say. CJ Stroud has made a lot more strides. I mean, Bryce Young had those couple moments where he fell off during the year, but I think honestly these two are still the top two choices going into the draft.
It's honestly weird with Bryce Young because he's actually played incredibly well, and the only reason Alabama is where they are right now is because of C.J. Stroud. And honestly, my analysis for the second pick, I know that the Raiders have Derek Carr, but at this point, I think they move on. I think apparently they are in too poor of a state to fire Josh McDaniels. So at this point, I think they try to levy some cap space, trade Derek Carr during the offseason, and pick up Bryce Young
Fire
here.
sale. It's a fire sale.
It's a fire sale in Oakland at this point. They are what we call an actual poverty franchise.
Yep.
There's nothing really to say there.
I don't know if signing Devontae Adams to that massive deal probably helped them at all.
No, I mean,
really think...
oh man. Listen, Devontae's played like well enough to earn the money.
Know.
Like that's the biggest problem is that they invested so much, and the only person who's even coming close to being at the value is the wide receiver they paid $25 million. But
well, when you also get rid of like one of your key components on your offensive line, in Alex Leatherwood, like that's a huge downer for them.
listen, they're gonna need to address offensive line somewhere. They can't do it at number 2. If you're at number 2, you have to address the quarterback position. There are no offensive linemen, guards, tackles that I would even say like maybe you pick Skoronski or Fashanu from Penn State, maybe Paris Johnson, but none of those dudes are worth the number 2 overall pick. I can't with that.
No, I would never say that, but like if they trade Carr away during the offseason, I'm expecting at least like a top round pick, maybe like second round, and they draft an offensive lineman then.
Honestly, this is a trade down position too. If the Lions wanted to move up, they could move 7 and 11 and go get Bryce Young if that's what they wanted to do. I think the Lions are a few pieces away. I wouldn't advise that, but this becomes a trade down situation where they could also trade with the Seahawks who have 2 first round picks. I don't think they keep this spot if they're at number 2. There's too many holes in their team for them to be able to keep this. I mean, just way too many. Their defense needs some work. Their offensive line needs some work. And if they move Derek Carr for another first-round pick, this absolutely still could be a trade piece where I would trade number 2 for 7 and 11 or 8 and 22 so that you can just stack talent. That's something that I would consider. Moving on to the Panthers at number 3. This could be a quarterback. This could be a lot of things, to be very honest with you, because their team is just not... It's another one of those rosters that just isn't very good. I mean, they've on a fire sale. They traded Christian McCaffrey away. They're going into rebuild mode. I don't necessarily think this is a quarterback spot. There's a lot of different ways the Carolina Panthers could go here. I'm just going to go with best player available. I think adding somebody on the opposite side of Brian Burns would make their defense incredibly good. I'm going to go with who I believe is the best player in the draft, Will Anderson Jr. He's the best edge rusher in the class at the very least and should have won the Heisman last year. And that's, I mean, adding to their defense is something that I think is going to be important to them long term. And adding another pass rusher on the other side of Brian Burns will absolutely help their defense. I know this could be a plethora of moves. Quarterback, could be wide receiver, could be corner, could be anywhere, to be very honest with you. But I'm going to go with the edge.
I think that their secondary is like pretty much set, and that's probably why they didn't trade away J.C. Horn, Jeremy Chin, and like C.J. Henderson. Um, like that secondary is pretty solid, and I think adding another edge rusher, like you said, would be a huge component to adding to that boost of defense. And I really do agree with you that I think the Panthers, as much as they would like a new quarterback, I think they're probably going to run one more year with uh, probably Baker, if anything. I don't know if Sam Darnold really is their option because they wouldn't have traded for Baker to do anything if they
So
didn't want him.
the thing with Baker, right, is I think he's only got 1 year left on his deal. They can address quarterback in free agency or even trade. If they wanted to go out and get, per se, Jimmy Garoppolo, who still think is tradable in the 49ers' mind, or
Yeah,
Jordan Love, even from the Green Bay Packers, who I believe is tradable at this point in time. They could go take a swing on a guy like that instead of going in the draft again. The draft hasn't necessarily worked out for them at quarterback. Going into free agency, trading for Baker hasn't necessarily worked out for them. At some point, they just got to figure it out. And honestly, with the quarterbacks up on the board, if Bryce Young or CJ Stroud was still here, I think they go with one of those two. But because they're both off the board, I don't think it's possible. This is
yeah,
also another trade down spot where they could trade with somebody and make moves, but I just don't see it happening. And at this point, we're moving on to the Eagles at 4. This is a trade down spot, but I think finding a trade partner for them would be somewhat difficult. So
yeah,
the problem is the Bears sitting at 6. They don't need a quarterback. They don't need anything that would go off the board before they get there. The Eagles don't really have a plethora of needs. I mean, we all know Howie Roseman loves big interior offensive or defensive linemen. I gave them Jalen Carter in the last mock draft I did, and I don't necessarily want to do that again. I think their secondary could use some addressing, and
yeah. Well, you got Darius Slay, who's getting up there in age. You got James Bradbury, who's getting up there in age. So they probably will sign Chauncey Gardner again, to add more boost to that secondary. But I mean, with the age coming around, you've really got to find a top tier talent at the defensive back position.
yeah, and I mean, again, I could really see this being Jalen Carter. I could see this being a trade down spot because the Eagles don't necessarily need it, and if they can trade it down to get 2 first round picks or a later first and another second, I think they could do that. But I mean, who has the capital to go up there? I don't think the Falcons do, even though I think they would like to pick up there. I mean, I don't necessarily love trading with the Texans here because the Texans don't need to move up to get the guy that I think they need. The
Yeah,
Packers could move up to get somebody, try to jump the Texans because I think that's the first or second, or try to jump the Bears because that's the first team that needs a wide receiver. But the Packers need a wide receiver, but not in their that's not in their history to trade up like that. So I'm just gonna
yeah,
go. I'm gonna go with Keely Ringo, who I think is the best DB on the board, and I think that's addressing a need that's gonna come up. They only have James Bradbury on a 1 year deal. He's played
yeah.
excellent, but I still don't think he's a bona fide number 2 corner. I think he's better in the slot.
No,
And if you re-sign James Bradbury, put Keely Ringo on the outside, and put James Bradbury in the slot, your team still gets better.
yeah. I mean, even if it was Jalen Carter, they signed a bunch of 1 year deals this during this season to add more to that run defense with Nick Nominus and who was it? Who's it? Who
Well,
was it they just also signed?
did
Like they're
they
adding a lot
signed
more.
Linval Joseph, and didn't they sign Ndamukong Suh too?
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot. And if they all perform well, which I mean they're all up there in age, this could be their final season. And I could also see them going for Jalen Carter to add more. 'Cause you got a lot of older defensive linemen up there, and Jordan Davis is the next big guy to take over. But like the potentially going to lose more if they all decide to retire at the end of the season if they win on a high note.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a fact. Jalen Carter would be your Fletcher Cox replacement. I also think this could be
Yeah.
a really high spot for Bijan Robinson to go because right now they have the running back by committee, and getting a bona fide RB1 in there would be absolutely nice. But
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna go with Keely Ringo. I think that's the biggest need on the team besides that
Yeah.
interior defensive line that's aging. And I don't want to make this similar to my last mock draft that we did a couple weeks ago, trying to make sure that everything comes with some variety. And
Oh yeah.
Jacksonville at number 5. I went with a wide receiver last time. I don't necessarily think that's where they're going to go. I'm going to go with the offensive tackle Fashanu. I think you can still get better on the offensive line and continue to protect Trevor Lawrence. Add to your running game. Fashanu's a very good blocker, both pass and run blocking. And at this point, I mean, Travis Etienne's going nuts. Trevor, your offense is looking very good. You could address defense, but I think you can do that in free agency this year. I'm going to go with the offensive tackle, get some extra protection for Trevor Lawrence and some extra run block for Travis Etienne on the back end.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
And honestly, that's really all I have to say about the Jaguars. There's still a lot of pieces to fill, but I'm going to go with the offensive tackle out of Penn State. Moving on to the Bears, I don't think there's any other way you can go here but wide receiver. And really the question comes down to, do you pick Jackson Smith and Jigba, Kayshon Boutte, Jordan Addison, or Quentin Johnson? I had Quentin Johnson going in the mid-20s last time. Over the last couple weeks, I've been watching the TCU games, and my mind is changed. I think Johnston is actually up there with the Jordan Addisons and the Kayshon Bouttés and the Jackson Smith and Jigbas of the world. And I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston being the first receiver off the board. I don't much like Jordan Addison, I don't think he flies off the combine. I could be wrong with that, but I think at this point with the way he's playing, Johnston deserves to be the number 1 receiver off the board.
Right. And especially since he's a big playmaker for TCU, I really think that's a big factor into that Bears offense that has just Darnell Mooney. You put Claypool in the slot and you run Johnson on the outside at 2. I really think that could really add some more variety into that Bears offense that really could use more help at the receiving core position.
That's fair. So with the Lions, again, last time I didn't give them a quarterback to replace Jared Goff because I think Jared Goff has played well enough to deserve another chance. But this time I'm not necessarily going to do that. I'm going to pick either Anthony Richardson or Will Levis here. If I'm the Lions, I'm looking at 2 quarterbacks who are very athletic, very big. Cam Newton, Josh Allen kind of reminisce. And I think this really depends on what you value. I think Anthony Richardson is a bit more of a playmaker, kind of in the Justin Fields mold, where Will Levis can sit in the pocket and launch bombs like Josh Allen does. I think Anthony Richardson is probably a little more polished at this point, and I think both of them have been incredible with weapons that aren't necessarily the best at times. I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson solely because this mock rates him higher. I don't necessarily... I think Will Levis might be my quarterback 3 when I go back and do all of these. But for right now, I'm going to give the Lions Anthony Richardson. Go and get a Jared Goff replacement. I still think they need to address their defense too, but they also have that pick at 11.
I mean, if they're smart and they want to keep Goff for one more year, they do. And then let Goff play it out so Richardson gets a year under his belt sitting behind him and kind of just like observe everything and then kind of just take over the team from there because everything might change how they want to play the playbook out, how they want to change things up for how Richardson plays, and they may need time to develop that. And if they don't, then it's just like you're just throwing them into a shitty situation where that Lions franchise, as much as they have grown now, could potentially rescind everything that they just went for.
No, that's a fact. And I mean, honestly, they could go again a plethora of different areas. I think their defense really needs help. Luckily, they have this pick here at 11 that I think should be defense. With Seattle, I don't think you can do anything but go Jalen Carter here. He's the best player on the board. He's the best defensive player on the board. And what you really need to do is address your defense. Your offense has looked great, but your defense hasn't necessarily looked wonderful. If Geno Smith continues to play the way he has, he's earned another contract. I mean, you're looking at a comeback player of the year candidate and a fringe MVP candidate if he continues to win and continues to play at the level he's played at. So
Yeah.
I think Jalen Carter adds a good interior pass rush to your defense, and honestly, I think this becomes a draft where the Seahawks just need to rebuild their entire defense, and again, then they come back as contenders again. That's really what I think.
Yeah, I can agree to that. And if Gino, like you said, if Gino does perform well throughout the season, I think he does earn another contract. I do see still potentially later on in this draft, potentially second round, maybe even later in the first round, that they find a quarterback that they want play behind him going into that next season, that they would want as their future, so that they can kind of like get ready for the next years.
Yeah, and I mean, they could go quarterback here with Will Levis and just treat Geno Smith as a bridge quarterback, but with the way he's playing, I don't think he's deserved that. And I understand this is the NFL, it's not about what players deserve, but like that's
Yeah.
just the way that I'm thinking about the Seahawks right now. Their offenses look fantastic, their defense hasn't necessarily looked all that great. Pete Carroll deserves a lot of credit for what he's done in Seattle, and this is the Denver Broncos pick, not Seattle's pick, obviously, but just want to make that clear that they are not actually picking at 8. This is technically the Broncos pick. And honestly, with the way the Broncos are playing and the strength of schedule that they have, this could move up into the top 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're back with the Texans, and again, this is all about offense with the Texans at this point. I don't think that there's much to talk about here. I think you just reunite C.J. Stroud with his with one of his favorite targets. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't in this class, but reuniting him with Jackson Smith and Jigba at the next level. We've seen this work with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. We've seen it work with a couple other examples that I can't think of off the top of my head. But honestly, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba becomes the pick. You took C.J. Stroud at number 1. You should take Jackson Smith and Jigba at number 9. I gave them the same pick last time. I think this could be Jordan Addison or Kayshon Boutte, but when we're going to go with Jackson Smith and Jigba here.
Well, as a reminder that this is also the Browns pick, and it could potentially drop though too, depending on how with Deshaun Watson coming back.
Yeah, this isn't going to stay at number 9. I think with Deshaun Watson coming back, they're going to pick up a couple wins. And honestly, with no draft pick to play for, I think the Browns are just going to try to make a playoff push as much as humanly possible when Watson comes back.
Yeah.
And as much of a piece of shit as he is, I mean, he's still probably... I haven't seen him play football in 2 years, so that's definitely going to probably be a little wonky at the start, but I think he picks it back up.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. If this stays where it is at this point in time, I do think giving C.J. Stroud a familiar face to throw to could help him a lot more on that Texans offense, and everything would fit into place. I mean, they still have some pretty good, decent receivers surrounding going into that. I mean, they're not like wide receiver 1 options, but they are like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 options that could help build the team for him.
And I mean, they still have Brandon Cooks, and I think he's under contract for a longer period of time. I know he wanted to trade out of Houston earlier this year, but I don't think they're necessarily going to move him this offseason. And adding Jackson Smith and Jigba next to a guy like Brandon Cooks who can absolutely burn would be absolutely wonderful for C.J. Stroud and his development. And honestly, if you're going to take a quarterback number 1 overall, the rest of your draft, or at least the rest of the moves that you make, should be towards helping that quarterback succeed. C.J. Stroud will start right away. I love Davis Mills. I think he's a very decent quarterback in the NFL. Maybe QB 25, somewhere around there right now. But if you have a chance to take C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, which they will, they have to do it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, Davis Mills was just a filler position, kind of filling that gap for when Deshaun Watson decided to, like, stop playing for, like, the past 2 years. And just, like, they needed someone, and Davis Mills was the answer for the time being. And it's not been the perfect for them, but, you know, the Texans franchise knew that probably going into this season, that, like, you know, this is a rebuild time, and it's going to take time for us to rebuild this whole entire team again.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've got the Steelers at 10 next. I think this could be a plethora of offensive positions, mainly quarterback and offensive line. I gave them Will Levis last time, and I don't necessarily want to lock them into a quarterback because I think they could still believe in Kenny Pickett as a player. So what I'm gonna do is give him Paris Johnson Jr. Actually, this comes down to two people, Paris Johnson Jr. and Peter Skoransky. Their running game has looked absolutely atrocious. So I think this comes down to whether you want to protect your quarterback or whether you want somebody who can go out there and be a mauler. And I'm going to go with Peter Skoransky here. I still love him out of Northwestern. He's one of the best overall blockers. He's ready to go day one, slide in and start. May not have as high a ceiling as Paris Johnson Jr., who could be an absolute stud at the tackle position, but Peter Skoransky is going to be very, very good for a very long time, barring any injuries. So I'm going to go with Skoransky here. I think this helps Najee Harris. I think this helps their running game and their offense overall. So that's what I'm going to do here.
I can agree to that.
Moving on to the Lions at 11. Honestly, your defenses looked atrocious, and the best way to make a bad defense look better is to get a pass rush that is virtually unstoppable. Aiden Hutchinson is still developing, but has looked decent this year. There have been a couple times where he hasn't looked as necessarily as good as I thought he would. But I'm going to go with Myles Murphy, add another edge rusher to the team, and essentially just work on your defense. I think that's the big thing that they have to address, and getting Anthony Richardson, helping him out with a better defense, is only going to make the team better. And Myles Murphy is an absolute bona fide stud on the edge. Nothing left to say.
I was gonna say potentially inside linebacker at that spot though too.
Yeah.
Could be another viable option.
Yes.
Just like either like a run stopping inside linebacker or someone who can control the field. Potentially Noah Sewell.
Yep.
Brother of Penei Sewell, I think would be honestly another decent choice there for them. But I do like your thoughts on it. Is that potentially just increasing that pass rushing option would be a huge vital option for them to kind of just like allow Anthony Richardson to like do better if he has a better defense. So he's not trying to be the whole entire focal point of the Lions franchise.
No, honestly, I gave them Noah Sewell last time at this spot. I think they literally picked at 7 and 11 the last time I did this too. They haven't moved much.
Yeah.
And inside linebacker is an absolute need. I think I literally went Myles Murphy and then Noah Sewell the last time we did this. And Myles Murphy at 11 is just too good to pass up. I think there are good inside linebackers later in the class. You've got Henry To'oTo'o in the second round, Justin Flo out of Oregon too. Eichenberg out of Ohio State is going to be a very good linebacker in the league. So they can pick up an inside linebacker later who might not be as good as Noah Sewell or Trenton Simpson, but I think Henry To'oTo'o can be really good. Justin Flo is going to be really good. And so I think edge at this point, if you look at the edges down the board, I mean, you have outside of the first round, you might be able to get BJ Ojolari, and Aduke Azoma from Kansas State, Nolan Smith from Georgia. Andre Carter from Army could be really good down the board too, but I don't think those guys are... The gap between Myles Murphy and those guys is larger than the gap between Noah Sewell and Henry To'oTo'o.
Yeah.
With the Packers, can it be anything different besides a wide receiver? I don't think it can be. I'm going to go with Jordan Addison, who I arguably think is the best receiver in this class. I know his stats are down since he's been at USC, but he's dealing with a lot of other talent around him, where at Pitt, he was kind of just the guy. When it comes to Jordan Addison, I think he's the best route runner. You look at, a Jordy Nelson, Donald Driver kind of build, where he's a very good route runner, knows how to get open. Devontae Adams essentially is one of those comps too, where this guy can just get open. He creates separation constantly. That's what I'm going to go with there.
I agree. They definitely need wide receiver, and they need to replace that Devontae Adams hole. I mean, you still have Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson who are making strides to do a lot better, but, I mean, you need to find a solidified wide receiver one option that can, really help them out.
And with the up-and-coming Christian Watson, Christian Watson's look decent, Alan Lazard's look decent, but Jordan Addison just gives them another weapon. And honestly, Christian Watson can develop into a wide receiver one, but getting Jordan Addison at 12, I think, is a perfect scenario for the Packers. And they could go probably a number of different routes here, but wide receiver is just the biggest need, in my opinion. That's the only thing I have to say about it. With the Falcons, you just traded away Calvin Ridley. I don't love your roster, Drake London is fine. Kyle Pitts is an absolute freak that you're just not using for some godforsaken reason. I don't understand the Falcons' offense at this point. Cordero Patterson's getting up there in age. Marcus Mariota is not going to be your starting quarterback forever. You drafted Desmond Ridder last year. You could go quarterback. You could go another different routes. I'm going to go with wide receiver Kayshon Boutte out of LSU. Again, solely because I don't love the options you have at wide receiver outside of Drake London, but not necessarily because it's their biggest need, but because everything else on your offense just is you just need playmakers at this point. I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah. That Calvin Ridley trade down the line really affects them going into potentially next season. So yeah, they definitely need a wide receiver to fill that gap. I mean, like you said, Drake London's making strides, but like Kyle Pitts, a freak of nature, you got to utilize the man, and like you got to do something. And getting a playmaker. You drafted a quarterback, what, second round last year with Desmond Ridder?
Third.
It was, yeah, he was the second quarterback to go off the board. I think he was, yeah. And, like, you're not utilizing him whatsoever. So you got to either decide, do you go quarterback or do you go receiver? I think it's time you go receiver. Potentially let Ridder do his thing. Potentially have Mariota go to a new team, trade him, get rid of him, do something. You just got to find some way to make that offense better.
See, Marcus Mariota hasn't done anything to tell me that he doesn't deserve another year. And that's the bigger problem is it's like you drafted Desmond Ridder with the thought process that Marcus Mariota was going to be your bridge quarterback, but he's played well enough to not be your bridge quarterback, which is a bigger problem for the Falcons. So I think adding another weapon just helps. I'm going to move on to the Cardinals here at 14. See, the problem is that the Cardinals have talent all over the field. The problem is their head coach. Like, you can't draft a new head coach. But there's a lot of things I think the Cardinals could do here. I genuinely think you go interior defensive line. I don't love the Cardinals defense, and Trenton Simpson out of Clemson, the linebacker, could help you. Brian Breesy, the defensive tackle out of Clemson, can help you. You could go Tyree Wilson on the edge. You lost Chandler Jones, and your pass rush hasn't been wonderful. You can go any one of those three, and I think you'll be fine. I don't think your offense really needs addressing. For the sake of some parity, I think they go edge here. I'm going to go with Tyree Wilson. Again, it's more adding pass rushers, making sure your defense is solidified. And honestly, the Cardinals' biggest problem is their head coach. They need to replace Cliff Kingsbury as soon as humanly possible, and that's my thoughts on the Cardinals.
It might be that said that, like, you know, the Cardinals with Kyler Murray, after giving him that huge extension, Cliff Kingsbury is kind of like turn the whole entire franchise like in an opposite direction that the team wants to go, and that defense, as much as it's got so much talent and everything, like, yes, like offensively they're fine, but you know, defensively Kingsbury's got to figure that out if he wants to stay. But like, you got Isaiah Simmons, who's either an inside linebacker or strong safety situation. He's so versatile, and I really think that like they got to figure it out where they want to play him. And adding an edge rusher after losing Chandler Jones is a huge thing that they need to pick up.
And say the name you just said again about the Cardinals defense.
Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah.
From Clemson.
Yeah. No. He's essentially the defensive Kyle Pitts, and I genuinely do not understand how the Cardinals have not figured out how to use him yet. Because you can use him in a number of ways, but normally you should use him as a monster backer and just say, see ball, get ball with a guy like that, and for some reason they just can't figure that out. And I just wanted to reiterate that because Isaiah Simmons is he's a great football player. I don't understand how they haven't figured out how to use him. And honestly, it infuriates me.
If I'm smart, by the time we get to the Patriots, I'm going to suggest something here.
The Colts, man, Is there anything they can do besides go quarterback here, especially with Will Levis on the board? Oh man, no. Honestly, I'm just gonna. There's no words. Quarterback, solidify your quarterback position, please. You haven't. You've had a different starter every year since Andrew Luck retired. It's time to go get your franchise quarterback. Is there any?
Will Levis though? Will Levis be the franchise QB?
Let me put it this way: Will Levis has all the traits to be a franchise quarterback. He should go in the
He
top
does.
10. He should go in the top 10, but at this point, with the way the board has fallen, it just wasn't necessarily the way
No.
it fell. Um,
No.
but there's really no analysis needed there for the Colts. Go get your franchise quarterback. With the Commanders, you could say the same thing, but the only quarterbacks left on the board are Hendon Hooker, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix Jr. And I
Hey,
don't
doubt Bo Nix.
listen.
Don't doubt Bo
Dude,
Nix.
I love Bo Nix. I don't care. I loved him when he was at Auburn.
Man's just making strides. Man is making strides at Oregon. And he's really showing off.
I cannot wait to go through this quarterback class. I'm not going to lie to you. I really can't. Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., who I loved at Indiana, who ended up transferring to Washington and resurrecting his career. Spencer Rattler down the board, Grayson McCall, Malik Cunningham, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Tyler Van Dyke. All of these dudes down the board, I absolutely adore. I cannot wait to go through and watch them. But with the Commanders on the board, I don't think you can go quarterback in this spot. I gave them Hendon Hooker last time. It is a reach, and I just can't do it again. So what becomes the next position of need? It is not wide receiver. They could go tight end and Michael Mayer here. They could go defense. The defensive line and the front seven of the Washington Commanders has always been good for them. I think they need to address their secondary. And then it becomes Cam Smith or Joey Porter Jr. I'm going to go with Joey Porter Jr., son of an NFL player. Cam Smith is really good. He's athletic. He's versatile. But Joey Porter Jr. here makes more sense for the Commanders. He can play the outside, can play the slot, very versatile. Could probably play a little bit of safety for you. You primarily want him as your cornerback too, at least to start out. Plug and play guy, ready to go, and it helps your secondary and your defense. I think that's the way they go.
I can agree to that. I mean, if Chase Young is able to stay healthy for the remainder of this season and going into next season as well, before the draft and everything, I think adding a corner that can actually be solidified after they got rid of their top corner to the Steelers.
Yeah, they traded William Jackson to the Steelers.
Yeah, William Jackson. I really think you gotta replace him with someone young. Joey Porter, I think, might be the best option to go with there out of Penn State.
And moving to the Chargers, there's literally no question for me about who they take. They take offensive tackle Paris Johnson Jr., guard tackle flexibility. Their offensive line has been atrocious. This defense on paper is really good. I don't know what's going on with them. I know they've been hurt. But at the end of the day, offensive line is your biggest need. You have to take Paris Johnson here. He's the best tackle available and the best lineman available. And that's really, I mean, you could address your defense, but there's nothing on your defense that really needs addressing. You just need to make the talent work, and you need to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Moving to the Bengals, this could be a lot of different picks. This could be a lot of different players on the board right now. You could address the tight end position of Michael Mayer. I don't think they necessarily do that. I think there's bigger needs. Their offense is very good. They don't need to add another weapon. I mean, they might. You could go offensive line here, but with Broderick Jones being the best offensive lineman on the board, I don't necessarily think that's the smartest move. Your run defense isn't very good. Your linebackers are aging. I think you go Noah Sewell out of Oregon, get the best inside linebacker, age your run defense, and make sure that your quarterback doesn't need to put up 35 points a game to get a W.
No disagreements there. Noah Sewell, fast as fuck guy from Oregon. Torpedo, pulls right through offensive lines to get the sack, get the tackle for loss if need be, or a stop. Great on sideline to sideline coverage. I mean, I think that's the best option the Bengals can go to kind of replace that aging linebacking core.
Honestly, that I like the analysis there. Moving on to the Bucks, I don't think there's any question again. Assuming that Tom Brady is back He's missed Gronk. He's missed a good tight end. Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame is the best tight end on the board. Honestly, could go way higher than this. There are a plethora of teams that could use him. And getting a guy that can catch in the red zone from that tight end spot, getting a guy who can pick up yards from that tight end spot is huge. And this is assuming that Tom Brady is back with the Bucs. I think he could be. I think he could go elsewhere this offseason. I believe his contract is up at the end of the year, and I don't see him retiring. So honestly, adding a tight end and getting a Gronk replacement is probably the biggest need for the Bucs.
Yeah, I can agree to that 100%. But if Tom doesn't, I do see them going a quarterback route, potentially with the guys that we named off. I think Bo Nix might be a better versatile option to put in that situation. They have a solidified offensive line down there. He has weapons still. I think giving him that type of situation where he could perform, I think would be the best option to go in that direction if Brady decides to retire.
See, the thing with that is I think they probably just trade this pick for Jimmy G at that point or another quarterback. I don't think at 19 they love the quarterback options, and I don't think that Hendon Hooker isn't a Tom Brady replacement and neither is Bo Nix. And
yeah,
so
but they're developmentals.
No, I know.
Replace them.
No, I know, but also I think this team has established over the last 3 years that they're ready to win now, and all they need is their quarterback to be, at the very least competent. And I'm not necessarily saying that Hendon Hooker and or Bo Nix wouldn't be. Hendon Hooker would be the more pro-ready of the two. But if Tom Brady leaves at that point, I think you just have to trade it and get a quarterback or make a move for a quarterback. And Michael Mayer just makes a lot of sense, assuming that Tom Brady is back. But moving on to the Broncos, man, offensive line is the only thing they can do here. I'm gonna give them Broderick Jones. Their defense has been stellar. I don't think they might lose a couple of pieces, but I don't think it's necessarily guys that are gonna make or break things. Your offensive line has been atrocious. Russell Wilson hasn't looked wonderful, but I don't know anybody who could with the pressure that he's facing. And your weapons are fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with the weapons that you have on the field. So, obviously, you need to address your offensive line.
Yeah, no disagreements there. That offensive line has kind of flopped a little bit. Before, the season started, this team probably looked more dangerous than it should have been. But losing Tim Patrick was a huge key factor to that. Jerry Jeudy making strides to say he wanted to trade out. Everything is just had fallen apart. I really think that this team needs to find an offensive line that can actually hold up. Maybe Russell Wilson during the offseason actually gets a little bit more comfortable up in Denver. I really think it has to do with altitude though too. He played in Seattle. It's different altitude as compared to where Denver is, and it's a lot different. I think he's just getting used to everything. I mean, looking over the season, he's definitely made a lot more strides, but I do think giving him an offensive line that can hold up would make the team a little bit better for it, and I think maybe help bolster the team in general.
No, I feel that. Honestly, moving to the Patriots here, I don't love the board for them. Their biggest need is wide receiver, clearly. Either that or offensive line, and there's nobody here besides maybe Osiris Torrance that you would want to take on the line. And at 21, it's a reach. We all know that Bill Belichick doesn't care about reaching. But I'm going to have them doing something different. We are going to move their pick to the Giants. I think they're going to trade 28 and 91 to move up 7 spots to New England's first at 21. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I still think there's a lot of things this Giants team needs, and this would just make a lot of sense for me. So we're going to make that move. The trade was declined. Oh, wow, it doesn't let you do that. I thought I could just do it.
Wow.
Hold on a minute. Let me see something. Let me see here. Let me see if this is a problem. Dude, okay. Let me just swap this out. I don't know what's up with that. That's fine. That's so dumb. Let me just swap first round picks then. I think they get a third here too, but let's just deal with that and go for it. How is the trade decline? They move up 7 spots. Okay, whatever. I don't care. I thought it was going to let me because I control all these teams. Apparently not. That's fine. We've got a mix half here. Fine. Imagine this is pick 28. They're just going to go with Osiris. No, they're not. Because guard isn't necessarily a need. They would need a tackle, and I don't love the tackles that are on the board. Antoine Harrison. Actually, Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse would make a lot of sense. So we're going to go with Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse here, offensive tackle. Obviously, Isaiah Wynn hasn't been the answer. Marcus Cannon is old, so I'm going to go with the offensive tackle. Plug and play Bergeron at right.
Yep. My idea was with the fact that we have Adrian Phillips and Cody Davis and Brendan Schooler at our strong safety position, and our inside linebacking core has been pretty decent for the Patriots. Trade our 21st pick to the Cardinals for Isaiah Simmons and potentially a 5th round pick. Solidify that middle line, that linebacking to the box area for our strong safeties, and I really think our whole entire defense is stacked. And with such a versatile player in Isaiah Simmons, I think that could work. And knowing the Patriots, they don't like drafting in the first round as much unless there's someone there that they can actually grab. This late in the draft, usually they don't really like it. So, I mean, why not? Trade out, get someone new, keep our 2nd round pick, we get someone new, and we were pretty much set.
No, I like that. Honestly, I could see them just trading out of the first entirely. I'm really surprised that this didn't just let me make that trade, considering I control all of these teams, but that's fine.
Yeah.
With the Seahawks, I think you love the way that the board has shaped out. Who did we give them at 8? We gave them Jalen Carter. So honestly, this could be an inside linebacker or a corner. I'm actually gonna go with Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Start rebuilding that secondary. Your defense hasn't looked good with an interior pass rusher and a guy who can stuff the run, and Cam Smith, who's a straight up boundary corner. I think you start rebuilding the defense. I think this entire offseason has to be about defense in Seattle.
Yep, it has to be.
With the Jets, again, you could go a number of different ways. I don't love the interior of their defense, the front 7. I know that Sauce Gardner has looked incredible. They struggled to stop the run with the Patriots. I think this is where Trenton Simpson's fall stops. This is where they get an inside linebacker who can really stuff the run, can cover, can do a lot of different things. He's athletic. He's a sideline-to-sideline guy. Make sure that your front 7 is good, and you've taken a big step forward.
Yep.
The Bills here, everybody has them going Bijan Robinson. I don't want to do that. I did it last time. I think it would make sense for them to do it, but for the sake of parity, I'm not. I think your secondary is getting up there in age. Jordan Poyer is looking for a new deal. They've got safeties who are potentially leaving in the offseason. Brian
Micah Hyde as well.
Yep.
Micah Hyde is also, so it's like you're losing both your top safeties right there. Actually, both your safeties are gone. That have been like the key factor point to that whole entire Bills defense. So like, yeah.
And so they need to. Brian Branch out of Alabama makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, that.
I was thinking that too. I was like, you got to replace one of them with someone in this first round.
And that brings us to the Ravens, who have actually a lot of needs that I think could be addressed here, including wide receiver, running back. I know you have J.K. Dobbins. I know you have Lamar Jackson, which negates the fact that you necessarily need a really great running back, but I think it would help. This could be another Bijan Robinson placement. I don't necessarily think that's the best option. Their pass rush isn't necessarily what it should be. I'm going to go with Isaiah Foskey, the edge out of Notre Dame. I think that's smart. I might have done this exact same thing last time with the way the board fell, but I think that's the best option they can go with here with the way the board has fallen.
Isn't Lamar's contract negotiation been complicated right now?
The contract is complicated, but they could still franchise tag him, I believe. Like, if they don't get a deal done, they can absolutely franchise tag him. They're going to get a deal done. He'll be fine. He's not going
I'm hoping they do, because that team desperately needs him, and I don't think they can have any viable options to do anything if they don't finalize the contract, and if they franchise tag him and he decides to do a full Le'Veon Bell type move or an Antonio Brown and kind of sit out and ask for that trade out.
Let me put it this way: I have no fear that the Ravens and the Lamar Jackson get a deal done. I have no there is no reservation in me that says they won't. I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah.
With the Cowboys, again, this could be a lot of different things. I'm more looking towards your defense. Obviously, Micah Parsons has made your defense look very good, but they got exposed last week. They got exposed a couple weeks ago. They haven't necessarily looked great on defense, at least over the last couple weeks. The first part of the year, they looked really good. Adding more help to that secondary is probably your biggest need. I would go Clark Phillips III out of Utah. Get somebody on the other side of Trayvon Diggs to make sure that your pass defense is actually as good as it seems, because right now I don't necessarily think it's as good as you think it is.
Yes, I can agree with that. That secondary has kind of looked a little atrocious, which is killing them. Pass rush, I mean, they're getting in there. The pressure on the quarterback has been fine. But yeah, they need to up that secondary because they've been exposed so much, and Trayvon Diggs cannot do everything if he's out there alone.
No, that's fair. The Tennessee Titans at 27, I actually think this becomes another corner. Their cornerback room is not wonderful. Their defense isn't great. You have Jeffrey Simmons, who I believe needs a contract. You have Harold Landry coming back from injury. Your front seven isn't necessarily wonderful, but on the back end, I think this could be Brian Bresee. Honestly, I'm going to go with Brian Bresee here, the defensive tackle. I think that's a bigger need than corner. I was going to go Christian Gonzalez, but looking at the board, Brian Bresee really needs to go, and he adds a big body to the middle of that defense.
That secondary is still pretty young. They still have a couple guys on their rookie contracts. I don't see any purpose of going for someone that high up on the board when they could possibly grab them in the second, third round to help bolster it. Like, they have a bunch of new guys, and I think they're just trying to figure out who's going to step up in that secondary and make the strides. I mean, you still got Kevin Byrd and you got Amani Hooker still out there. Or is it Amari Hooker? It's one of the guys. They're out there in the safeties. I mean, they're help bolstering that secondary. I mean, as long as Mike Vrabel and the defensive coordinator get things together and turn it around, I think interior is more important than the secondary right now. Getting Brian Bresee is probably the best option for them to solidify everything.
No, that's fair. Moving to the Giants at 28, again, this could be a plethora of teams. This is the definition of an overperforming franchise right now is the New York Giants. I don't love the back end of their defense. I don't love their receiving core. I don't love their offensive line. I don't love their front seven on their defense. There's not a lot I really like about the Giants. Yet here they are picking at 28 because I think they're 7-2 right now. I'm gonna go with Christian Gonzalez from Oregon, the cornerback out of Oregon. Again, athletic, one of those dudes who you can put on the boundary. I think it helps their defense, and with it being, best player available in Christian Gonzalez, unless it's Bijan Robinson, you don't have a need at running back. So best player available at a position of need. Give him a corner. Make sure the pass defense is shored up.
Yep, I can agree. Mostly because, after cutting James Bradbury and now Xavier McKinney being out, it's been a huge factor. I think Xavier McKinney has been for that defense. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau's making a name for himself, but secondary needs to help the most in this situation.
With the Vikings, I think you can say, again, there's a lot of positions that they could get better at. I think their biggest need is a third wide receiver, even though they just added TJ Hawkinson. And, I mean, it's a luxury, but I'm going to go with Josh Downs out of North Carolina. Next highest rated wide receiver on the board, and adding a guy behind Thielen who can come in, step in as he ages is probably the big, like, moving forward, like looking ahead to your future. This is a pick that makes sense because of the fact that Adam Thielen isn't getting any younger, and you're still going to need a second guy behind Jay Jets when Thielen starts to regress, which we've seen him regress over the last couple of years. Not necessarily as bad as everybody thought he would as he aged, but still, you've seen him regress. You've seen him take a step back. He isn't the same guy as when Diggs was there. So adding a third receiver to that offense makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes, yes. I completely agree. Hawkinson is going to stay. Thielen with his aging. Yes, they traded for Jalen Reagor. They do have some KJ Osborne as well. I think that they'll be perfectly fine drafting another wide receiver to help that wide receiver room, and potentially doing a lot better going into the future, though, too.
And don't take anything I said as a knock on Thielen. I love Adam Thielen as a football player. I think he's a great route runner and a really good receiver. But also, looking ahead, you need to make sure that you have a guy behind him. And I don't think Jalen Reagor's the answer.
I don't think KJ Osborne is the answer right now either. But,
and now you're getting into the luxury picks where Kansas City, honestly, their defense still isn't wonderful. Pat Mahomes makes up for a lot of deficiencies. This could be another place where you go wide receiver and kind of reach a little bit. I don't necessarily love that for them. I think they need to address their secondary. I'm going to give them a safety in Antonio Johnson out of Texas A&M. I think it makes a lot of sense. Their safeties, they needed safety help for a long time. Getting a guy like Antonio Johnson in the back end of the first round makes a lot of sense. And having a guy over the top and somebody who can play the box helps.
That's why they added Justin Reed, but Justin Reed hasn't made those strides either right now.
That's a fact. And at the back end of the first round, this is the ultimate luxury pick because the Eagles are so deep. They're just going to go Bijan Robinson. I have no problems giving them a running back here. Their running back room isn't spectacular. Miles Sanders is okay, but I don't love it. And Bijan Robinson gives you a bona fide RB1 for the next decade, and you don't ever have to question it. So, going to go with Bijan Robinson there, and that will be the end of that. Any problems with that, Andrew?
Nope, I think that's all there.
No, and that's my mock draft there. Ending with Bijan again. I don't think he necessarily falls that far, but the way the board fell, that's kind of how it went. And just a reminder, click that like button, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know how we did. Just a reminder, we're live every Tuesday night at 7 p.m., bringing more content like this. Peace.